defining characteristic of society has always been its ever-changing beauty standards. And yet with each decade that ushers in an emphasis on a new body type, this specific feature still becomes the most desired thing. Despite the fact that we know that in 10 to 20 years it'll be gone or completely changed, its time in the spotlight still puts immense amounts of pressure on young people, in particular women. So how do societal pressures impact period films and vice versa? Well, to begin, we need to look at casting. The first name that pops into your head when you think period films is likely Keira Knightley. She starred in her fair share, as has Winona Ryder, Elle Fanning and Lily Rose Depp. And what do all these women have in common? They're very slim. These films were released between the 90s and early 2010s, a time when petite was the only shape being shown in the media. While it's not quite as drastic as the supermodel body of the early 90s, it's not too far off, and these women all reflect that standard immensely. You can't necessarily take an issue with this when you're coming from a media standpoint. If you look at any other mainstream film that stars a beautiful lead actress, chances are they'll have a very similar figure. So why is this such an issue when it comes to period films? Well, these are actually what the women who these actresses are playing looked like. All the way up to the 19th century, before the Industrial Revolution, weight was a sign of class. Essentially, the fatter you were, the wealthier you were, and thus the more desirable your social status, and so yourself, was. It marked the fact that you weren't working in the fields and that you could afford to eat well, which were both very desirable traits at the time. Also, the primary responsibility of women in this period was caregiver. They were married to bear children and continue the family line, especially in relation to the characters that these women are playing, who are predominantly aristocrats or from the elite. This meant that wide hips and everything that comes with them, like bigger thighs and a tummy, were desired. It marked that a woman would be a great childbearer and thus would be able to do her job. I say job with air quotes around it. Now, it does need to be said that for women there was a cap on their weight in relation to beauty. Aristocratic men could get as fat as they wanted, but women were most desirable when they had a full figure and a chunkier body. And often, as you can see with these women, a lot of that fat was carried in their face as well. So how does all of this relate to period films? Well, the women that play them don't reflect the true historical figures. They don't reflect the beauty standards of the time, or even the depth of meaning that was related to these bodily expectations. So when these specific actors and actresses are cast, it does two things. First, it erases history. We aren't being shown the true nature of the time, the societal power struggles and the further inability to jump between classes, and the reality that beauty expectations come loaded with other meanings. It also seriously enforces current beauty standards. By erasing different desired figures that have come and gone, the narrative that this current beauty standard is the all-important, all-pervasive, all-desired one gets stuffed down audiences' throats. Young, impressionable people walk out believing that they would never have been, and never will be, the desired protagonist because their stomach is too full, or their legs are too skinny, or whatever insecurity isn't being shown. Often these films are love stories, so we are being fed the idea that only one specific body type, the one that fits the current narrative, has and will ever be the one that ends up with a beautiful romantic love affair. This is such a dangerous game to be playing, especially because of the amount of emphasis that our society puts on relationships. The women who play these figures have the ability to get cast in almost any film being made today because they fit the current narrative beauty-wise. But if the women who fit 18th century beauty standards aren't even allowed to be involved in the telling of that story, then how are they ever going to be included in the current narrative surrounding weight and beauty? By excluding these different bodies and sizes, we're further ostracizing women, men, and people who don't reflect what we as a society currently deem beautiful. And the danger of that is immense.